Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
I volunteered to shuttle people around at a local event,
Yeah?
running the golf cart. There were a couple of volunteers that needed a ride, and as they got out, one of the guys turned to me and he said, "Thanks for the ride. He's gay and I'm ace." And I thought, wow, that's interesting that, you don't expect somebody to just tell you randomly what their orientation is. I wanted to tell them I'm an ally, but actually I'm part of the community and I have a podcast. But it went so fast. And then I found myself going away and I was not quite sure what to say. Probably an hour or an hour and a half later, I came back and they flagged me down again. They needed another ride and they got back in and I remembered them. As we were in the cart, they were pointing out girls. And I thought, that's interesting. You wouldn't think asexual and gay people would be pointing out girls, but I guess. And I said, "So you're ace, right?" He said, "Yeah. And he's Gary."
Where are we worldwide? We talked not long ago about what's the future of the LGBTQ plus community for the next year. And how are things going? What are the trends? What's happening? Certainly here in the U.S., we have some concerns. Let's take a look globally and find out, where are we in the entire world? How are things going? Overall, the global trend in LGBTQ acceptance and rights has been increasing over the past few decades. But the picture of progress is also a picture of backsliding.
And it's a little similar to what we were saying back at the end of June as we were looking forward, that there are some things to be really concerned about, but there's also a lot of real bright spots.
Yes, there are. And I think we need to look at both of those things. And I'd like to first suggest that we take a look at it regionally and find out just exactly where we are, and also generationally, because that matters too. And we have noticed that there are variations in both of those things, and we want to take a look at that. Acceptance is highest in countries like Iceland, Norway, the Netherlands, Sweden, Canada, Australia, with 85 to 94% of the citizens considering their area gay-friendly. Now, that's something to be very happy about. Also, Latin America has progressed notably from a lower baseline, of course, but they really have progressed dramatically. Latin America is progressing. In Africa and the Middle East, acceptance remains low and the progress is slow. And when you look at generationally, where are we? Younger generations, especially Gen Z and millennials, consistently show stronger support and more LGBTQ plus identification than the older ones.
Right. Now, millennials, of course, are going to be right now, they would be in the age range between 29 and 44 years old, which makes sense. We always think about the millennials were the ones that grew up with computers and being much more aware of technology. They were the first generation to grow up with the internet. They never had a life without the internet. And they remember some of those days of dial-up. Now, I'm just a little bit old to be a millennial. I'm just outside of that time zone myself, but a lot of my friends are millennials. And so I think a lot like a millennial. Mm-hmm. But then the youngest generation, or the younger generation after that, is Gen Z. Now, Gen Z is going to be all of my kids, and they're between 13 and 28 years old. So my oldest is still well within that, and then my youngest is just inside of that. Not quite as a Gen Alpha, but she's right on the cusp. Sometimes they'll call them cuspers because they're right on the edge there. But for Gen Z, they were the ones that grew up with cell phones. They've never known a world where they were not connected, where they did not have access to YouTube and access to ideas and see people all around. And I think something about that access to ideas helps people and has created a much wider global culture than you or I had, because we were much more insulated before we had access to all of those things on the internet.
And I, of course, as a boomer, I can tell you, I didn't have any internet or any of that. So I didn't get a lot of information from my slide rule.
I sometimes think back to those days and I think, how did we ever get anywhere?
Yeah.
Can you imagine in those days we had to drive places, and then if you had to get a hold of somebody, you just had to wait till they got to a place where there was a phone.
Where there was a phone booth.
Yeah, it seems so foreign now that you think you just put something in on your phone and you see where the map takes you. Well, those same things that have helped us to navigate the world so easily and to stay connected have also helped Gen Z to be much, much more accepting. So we are seeing the trends going in a very positive direction in regards to Gen Z.
Yes, but not in regards to the population as a whole. Let's take a look at some of the setbacks and polarization. A significant polarization has emerged throughout the world. The most accepting countries have become more so, and the least accepting had further declines. In recent years, some have alarming slippage. In some regions, especially the rise of authoritarian or ultra-conservative governments, make a big difference. Examples like that would include new laws in countries like Uganda, Mali, Ghana, and increasing repression in the U.S. under the Trump era and their policies. And in Europe and beyond, there's a concerning trend of populist right-wing parties exploiting LGBTQ issues to divide societies and roll back all these protections that we've been working on. So you can see how frustrating that is. But I think maybe it's better for us if we just take a look at some of these countries. Where are they now and where are they headed? How does that affect the entire region?
Well, I would like to start with some of the positive things in places in the world, because if you're an LGBTQ person looking for positive acceptance, these are some great places to start. One of the big ones is Western Europe. We're finally seeing places like the Netherlands, Spain, Germany, France, Sweden, Norway, and Iceland being very, very accepting, having laws that are protecting us, having marriage equality, having laws for transgender people where we're able to self-identify rather than having to have certain surgeries or go through and jump through a bunch of hoops on things. And a lot of people get concerned about that, and they think, well, self-identification, well, then that means that, any man can just identify. You know what? Globally, we see from these countries, you don't have people that are not transgender identifying as the gender. Everybody wants to identify as the gender that they actually are. And when we look at these countries, we see that these strong anti-discrimination laws and the broad support at the society level and inclusive education and healthcare are really bringing a lot more cohesion. We're seeing the cultures strengthened rather than being brought down. We are not seeing people take advantage of the system. Instead, what we are seeing is transgender people able to live healthier lives, and people in same-sex relationships able to live happy lives together and to live the same as everybody else. We're seeing true equality, and that looks really good when you have a culture that has everybody being treated more equally.
Western Europe is definitely being a trendsetter here.
And in Greece, they are on track to legalize same-sex marriage. I'm going to read the story directly from Reuters. It says the conservative government submitted a bill to Parliament that legalizes same-sex civil marriage. The legislation is expected to pass given the Prime Minister's center-right party majority and likely support from leftist lawmakers. So that's good news there as well. We don't normally hear of the conservative governments supporting LGBTQ issues. In Greece, it seems that they're the ones that are actually driving things forward. That's wonderful news.
But also, so is North America. We take a look at North America, and we take a look at our neighbor to the north, Canada. They are highly accepting. They have strong federal protections, and they are culturally inclusive society. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
It really is. I have some friends from Canada, and I asked them, will I be seeing you at a festival here in the United States that we normally go to? And they said, we think right now with the current climate, we're going to stay right here. We're very happy here where we are, and we're a little nervous about how things are there. And I understand that.
However, looking at the U.S., and I understand the concerns that people have, in the U.S., it does vary by state and also by region. Coastal and urban areas like New York, California, and Illinois has a large urban population, Massachusetts, those areas are very accepting. Well, some of the southern and rural areas are less so, or even anti-totally.
I think in rural areas, it's assumed that you're going to have just necessarily a lot less acceptance. But I find living in a small town, I actually have quite a bit of acceptance. That doesn't mean that it's perfect, but I, this last June, put up a pride flag, and I didn't have any negative consequences from it. And I will occasionally do things. I'm not way out there in terms of how out I am, but I will wear rainbow things, and I never get pushback. I never have somebody say, oh, I can't believe you're wearing that gay stuff again, or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Now, are there some negative attitudes? Yes, absolutely. But are they widespread, and do we see them all over the place? I don't think as much. We are a little concerned about the legislation and things, but by and large, one of the things that I really appreciate about the United States, and especially our area, is that there is a sense that we are free, and you are free to live however you want to live. And I might not be into what you're into, but you do you, and however you live your life is fine with you. I'm going to live my life as I want over here, with some obvious exceptions. I think in general, things are better off than they are bad. Even the bad things that we're seeing, negative legislation and things, are more attacking specific issues rather than trying to say, you're wrong for living how you want to live.
Yes, I think that's true. So let's take a look at Oceania. New Zealand is among the most LGBTQ affirming countries globally. That's really nice to know. Australia has strong legal protections and growing social acceptance. South America, in selected countries, things are really good. Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Colombia, legal same-sex marriage and anti-discrimination laws are in place. Urban centers are generally very accepting in those areas. And some parts of Asia. Taiwan. By the way, Taiwan was the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage.
Wow.
That's wonderful. Thailand. Socially tolerant with pending legal progress on marriage equality.
That's right. Thailand appears to be on track to legalize same-sex marriage this year after lawmakers have overwhelmingly passed a draft legislation back in December. So it hasn't gone through yet, but we're very hopeful. At least not at the time that we've recorded this, but at the time that we're airing it, check it out. Maybe they have.
It is great to hear that wonderful news, but there is on the horizon the less accepting regions. And we'll get to that right after the break.
I'm Chuck Reynolds, and I started listening to Transcend because Joe is my friend. I keep listening because I have friends, colleagues, and family members who are part of the LGBTQ community, and I want to better understand their struggles and perspectives. I have become a supporter because I believe Joe and Raya are truly helping to preserve relationships and save lives. Join me in supporting Transcendent. Just go to transcendent.com, click on support, and select the amount you'd like to give each month. It can be as little as $3, and you can cancel at any time.
Let's take a look at the less accepting regions now. Regions and areas that there's social stigma, state-sponsored discrimination, and criminalization for a lot of these things that are now legal in so many of the other accepting countries. For example, looking at the Middle East, most countries, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, criminalize same-sex relationships, often with very severe penalties. LGBTQ plus life is largely underground due to harsh laws and religious conservatism, unfortunately. And the sub-Saharan Africa area,
We're in the Middle East right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we don't want to do sub-Saharan Africa yet.
Okay.
There are still many countries where you can get the death penalty for being gay, including Saudi Arabia. Let me see which ones these are. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Yemen, and in addition, many other Middle Eastern countries have a possible death penalty, 10 years in life for prison, or 8 years imprisonment, or just criminalization in general for being gay. Things are really, really tough. Now, there are some groups that are doing their best to fight back. So, for instance, there are groups like Helem in Lebanon, established in 2000. It's considered the first LGBTQ plus organization in the Arab world. Their goal is to advocate for a repeal of Article 534 in Lebanon's penal code, which punishes unnatural sexual intercourse, which is really used as a way to penalize LGBTQ plus people. There's a group called Rainbow Street. This NGO is committed to supporting LGBTQ plus individuals facing systemic oppression and persecution in the Middle East and North Africa. There's a group called Outright Action International, a group called Majal that is in Bahrain, Al-Qaz, that's ALQAWS in Palestine, and a group called DAMJ, D-A-M-J in Tunisia. Now, of course, these groups face a lot of legal restrictions. They're under all kinds of social pressure. There's political obstacles and there's a lot of safety concerns. But we're very, very glad for what these groups are doing in an effort to stand up and to fight back.
Let's take a look at the sub-Saharan Africa. Criminalization in over 30 countries is in that area. In some places, laws have worsened recently. Uganda's Anti-Homosexuality Act in 2023 is one of those examples. There are a few exceptions. South Africa, legal protections and marriage equality are there. In Botswana, decriminalization took place in 2019 there, and that's a move in the right direction. So there are a few things happening there both ways, but with 30 countries in that area being worse and gives me cause for concern.
Yeah, and one of the sad things to me is there are some American pastors who are actively helping to stir the flame, to stir up difficult things here. For instance, the Human Rights Watch and Human Rights Campaign indicated that Scott Lively, an American anti-LGBTQ plus activist and attorney, has been influential in promoting anti-homosexuality laws in African countries like Uganda. Or then one of the pastors that I saw back in my conservative days, Lou Engle, is part of the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, and he has been very vocal in helping get some of these terrible laws passed in Uganda. It's very, very sad. It breaks my heart.
Yeah, that's tough. It really is. So let's go on. Take a look at Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Countries like Russia, Hungary, and Poland have laws limiting LGBTQ plus rights. They have a lot of gay propaganda laws. They have rising nationalism and religious influence that contribute to lower acceptance of the LGBTQ plus community. That in itself is another reason for us to just feel concerned. What's happening? Are things going in the wrong direction? That's what we think when we hear this kind of thing.
It's really sad for me to think that gay propaganda laws is me just saying, I want to exist. Or people in the LGBTQ plus community saying, I just want to live my life. It's not going out and saying, hey, we're trying to turn the kids gay. You can't turn anybody gay. All we're looking to do is live our lives.
In South Asia, India decriminalized homosexuality in 2018, which is great. But unfortunately, social stigma remains very widespread in India.
And of course, keep in mind that decriminalizing is not the same as legalizing.
Right.
So it means we're not going to persecute you for this, but we're not saying what you're doing is okay either. It was definitely a step in the right direction, but there still is a long, long way to go. I have someone who is very close to me that I can't even talk about on this podcast because she's from India and her family could hear. And I can't even mention anything about it and her queer identity at all because of the stigma and the bad things that are surrounding her. And it breaks my heart.
We have similar stigma in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and these people are highly stigmatized and criminalized. And that has not yet changed. We keep hoping that things are going to change, but we're not there yet.
Right. And then as we get out to Southeast Asia, we see a lot of things as well. Places like Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, I mentioned before. Parts of these countries criminalize LGBTQ plus people, especially under Islamic law. That's one of the things that's so sad is when you get any kind of religious fundamentalism, but especially the most conservative branches of the Abrahamic religions can come down so hard on us. And the thing about it, as we've talked about on this podcast, you see very few passages in any of those religious texts, even talking about being gay or lesbian. We've addressed that here. And then we had on this podcast a year ago, we had my friends Amira and Julia, who are a gay transgender couple. They're two trans women that are together, and both are Muslims. And I asked them at length, what does the Quran say about things? And they said, nothing. It doesn't have any more to say than the Bible does, and it actually has a lot less to say. And so these texts are used as weapons against us, but not out of the texts themselves, but only out of some small-minded people that want to push these texts to say what they want to make them say. And it breaks my heart.
I've got a couple of three other first world countries that are with it. They're right up there, and they're worth a look. The first I want to take a look at is Japan. When I lived in Japan back in the 60s, I felt as though those people were accepting to the, I can't say LGBTQ plus community because a lot of that wasn't known at that time. There wasn't much to say, but they did know about gays and lesbians. And I felt that they pretty much were accepting. Here's one interesting thing about Japan. The same-sex relationships have never been criminalized. They've always been legal. Same-sex marriage is not yet legal nationwide, but some municipalities issue partnership certificates.
They say 40% of the local governments, including Tokyo, provide those, which is a good first step, I would say.
Yes, it certainly is. There are no national protections, but some local governments, like Tokyo, like you said, have protections in place, and others as well. But they are local governments. They're not by prefecture, and that makes a difference.
Right. Now, some of Japan's high courts in Nagoya and Osaka have ruled that the country's ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. So we'll see what follows from that. There have been similar rulings in Tokyo, Fukuoka, and Sapporo. But despite those rulings, nationwide legislation fully legalizing same-sex marriage has not been fully enacted yet. So we're hopeful, but we don't see anything directly on the horizon.
Right. Generally, the country is moderately accepting, especially among young people and in urban areas like Tokyo and Osaka. And that's interesting as well because that's so similar to where we are in the U.S. LGBTQ plus themes are increasingly visible in pop culture, just like they are here, though traditional values still shape public opinion. So the summary is growing acceptance, but legal rights still lag behind the Western nations.
Right.
They're getting there. One of the more LGBTQ plus tolerant countries in Asia, though. That's what I'll say.
That's good. And let's move on now to talk about China. Now, when I was growing up, we always thought about the U.S. versus Russia. But that has really changed now, so that now you are seeing the two global players are the U.S. and China. And so when we look at China, what are attitudes there, that is going to become increasingly important as we go forward. Well, one thing is that same-sex relationships have been legal since 1997, although same-sex marriage is still not legal. There are no national protections based on sexual orientation or gender identity, so we don't see those anti-discrimination laws. But we do see, in general, some more openness. It's just not directly protected. There is quite a bit of media censorship, just as there is on all kinds of issues. In China, we see it especially on LGBTQ plus content. LGBTQ plus organizations and events are often restricted or shut down. And online content about LGBTQ plus rights is sometimes removed or filtered.
But the social attitudes are mixed. Some are more tolerant in urban areas like Beijing, Shanghai, but strong stigma remains, especially in the rural communities. You notice that seems to be a worldwide trend, doesn't it? Coming out can be really difficult due to family expectations and social conformity, not due to government situations. So the summary is, legal status is neutral, but government repression and cultural conservatism result in limited visibility and limited protections. So the last country we want to mention here is South Korea. Again, another first world country. Same-sex relationships are legal. They never were criminalized. Same-sex marriage is not recognized yet, similar to Japan.
And China.
Yes. Anti-discrimination laws, attempts to pass inclusive laws have repeatedly failed because of opposition, especially from conservative Christian groups. South Korea is strongly Christian.
That I know from my conservative days, we were looking at South Korea as the model for what we wanted to be. They are largely much more Christian than any other country. They're one of the largest Christian countries in the world now.
So what are the social attitudes? They are increasingly LGBTQ plus. They have increasing LGBTQ plus visibility in media and pop culture, just like the others. Conservative Christian influence leads to backlash against LGBTQ plus rights, especially around pride events. They don't like that. Young people tend to be much more accepting than older generations. We see this over and over. Ultimately, rapid cultural shifts are happening, but legal protections and broader social acceptance still remain limited. It's still a fight. It's still a fight out there. But with that, we want to take a look at how does this look collectively? Let's put all this together. Yeah, we talk about a lot of bad things out there, a lot of things we're disappointed in, a lot of things that don't seem to be making any progress. But is that really the case? Acceptance, according to the UCLA Williams Institute Global Acceptance Index, social acceptance has significantly increased since 1980. Out of 175 locations in 56 countries, they saw increases. 57 saw decreases, and 62 remained stable.
Now, of course, notably Western Europe, as we talked about, North and South America, Australia, and New Zealand experienced strong upward shifts since 1990. Other regions have been more mixed or stagnant, according to the Williams Institute. Gallup reports that by 2023, for the very first time, a majority of people globally said that their area is a good place for gay or lesbian people. And back in 2006, the percentage was only 21%. So we have made leaps and strides here. It's easy to look around at the world and get really discouraged by the progress that we still need to make. But we have made so much progress so far. And there are so many places in the world that if you are persecuted, if you can get to one of these places, that you can live a truly good life, you can fit right in, you can be part of the culture. And that's a big, big deal.
Younger generations throughout the world are driving the future progress. Those young generations of today will be the old generation of tomorrow. And they're already setting the trend. We're on the right track. This is a really positive thing for the entire LGBTQ community worldwide. So yes, globally, acceptance and legal rights for LGBTQ people have broadly increased, but the rise coexists with emerging pockets of repression and rollback, particularly in parts of Africa, Eastern Europe, and some of the more conservative political movements. They're out there. But all of those politicians who are trying to set the trend or trying to hold things back are going to lose out to the generation of the future, which I say hooray for the generation of the future. That generation of the future is a little bit like the future generation of the 1860s who saw the end of slavery and began moving things forward to total acceptance. There's still pockets of unacceptance out there. It takes centuries. But we are moving and will continue to move in the right direction.
That's right. If you look in the wrong places, it's easy to feel down about that. But one thing that will never get you down is this podcast. We're grateful to have you coming back week after week.
I want to give a shout out to the people that have been following my suggestion to share this podcast with other people. We see the needle moving in our direction. Right now, we are in 64 countries. That's because of some of the things you've done. I don't even know how some of the people hear us. It's because what you are doing for us out there, and I want to thank you for that. I see us growing locally here in the U.S. I appreciate all that you do. I want to thank you for that. With that, we'll not only see you Monday, but we'll see whoever you suggested to listen to this podcast.
Fukuoka.
You won't pass as Japanese.
I will give that one up right now.